Hi everyone, welcome to Start Your Art. I'm your host, Misty Olson, and today we have the pleasure of speaking to Nancy Hillis. She is a trained psychiatrist, author, artist, and she has helped thousands of creatives tap into their own creative process and create the work that they've wanted to. And today she is going to speak with us about giving ourselves the permission to create. Hi Nancy, how are you today?
Hey, Misty, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you and be in conversation.
Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your artistic journey?
Yes, so I am a psychiatrist and author, and so I was kind of on this path for years of becoming a physician and then a psychiatrist after that, and it took years. And so I'm going along, but I also felt as I was going on this journey of becoming a physician, a very circuitous route, that I felt this calling, and it would show up as these whispers that said, hey, let's paint a abstract watercolor, or let's write a book or something like that. So I had these artistic urgings, but I was very busy in my training. And so one day, at the very last day of 7 years after medical school training, and I had done, internal medicine, diagnostic radiology, psychiatry, child psychiatry. Finally, there was the day that I graduated, and I was 32 years old, and I had this urging immediately. I said to myself, I want to learn sculpture. And I didn't know where I was going to go to do this, how to start. So I just looked in at that time, the yellow pages. we used to have phone books. And there was no sculpture teacher out there for me. So I ended up calling a place called the Pacific Art League in Palo Alto. And one thing led to another. I found my teacher. I wanted to take private lessons in her home because I said, I don't know what I'm doing. And the moment I said, I don't know what I'm doing, she said, great, fantastic. And I knew I'd found my teacher when I heard that. So I got a 25-pound bag of clay, took it to her home, and we began. And this began my journey. And it started, here's the interesting thing, is that you begin a journey and then you never know what will open up next. So there was this bluebird that happened that I had no idea ahead of time was going to happen. I started out with sculpture and loved it, working in clay, building up in clay and creating these Italian plaster models or molds, cracking it open, pouring the molds, all of that, the old Italian method. And then unbeknownst to me at the beginning, my teacher was a watercolorist as well. And so then when I saw that, I said, hey, will you teach me watercolor? She said, sure. I'm not a watercolor teacher, but yeah. And so I started painting watercolors and doing sculpture. And then that unfolded into collage. And then one thing led to another, got into oils. And before you know it, then I was painting an abstract, more and more abstract. I went from kind of figures and landscapes to more and more abstract expressionism or non-objective painting, and into mixed media and going larger. And all these steps along the way, it was scary at times because of not knowing, again, I don't know what I'm doing, right? And so, but one thing leads to another. And I believe that when we take a step, it opens up another possibility, and that's called the adjacent possible. And so that comes from evolutionary biology. It's a concept. And so anyway, it's like it's so powerful to really listen to these creative impulses, these callings, because they can be very subtle and easily missed or dismissed.
I couldn't agree more, and I love the fact that you bring this up because I know as a professional artist, they really try to teach you to focus on one thing and really be known for that one thing. But I love the fact that you have to be brave enough to try those creative urges or those creative callings to try to do other things so that way you can evolve creatively. And I love the fact that you brought that up, and just taking each step and knowing when it was time to let go before you started the next journey. So I really love that you talk into that, because I started following you some time ago back, but I loved the one piece that I really loved that you talked about, because I felt so bad. I felt so guilty for stopping so many times. But then you wrote this piece that was talking about there's like a million steps before you get to one. Um, and and I just really resonated with that. I'm just like, no, I've just been doing all the things before I get to one. And it kind of released that guilt and shame for me being creative, like just creative and exploring all of these different things versus to have such a structure and rigid to that.
Yes, I really believe that what we begin to understand as we go along this path is that it's really about allowing. As we begin to allow these creative impulses to come through, these subtle ones, and we say yes to them instead of ignoring them or dismissing them, what we find out is that it's really about evolving. It's really about evolving your art, evolving your life. It's continually in flux. It's continually in movement. And so when you invite that in and you explore and you experiment, then you realize it's okay. And it's not, you're not perhaps so kind of rigid with yourself, right? And so you kind of move beyond this concept that there are these rules. And so many people have spoken about that. Victor Hugo, the writer, Picasso, Helen Frankenthaler, really that in essence, there are no rules. You are the author, the composer, and the artist, and you are on this journey of unfolding whatever is trying to come through you.
That's so interesting that you brought that up, because I think it was yesterday or the day before I started reading this article about throwing out the rules, because we as artists actually create the rules. Like, we don't have to follow rules. We're actually creating something out of nothing. And so there are no rules. It's all up to us and whatever we decide. And it was such an exciting thought for me. And I'm just like, wow. So instead of trying to do ABC, what happens if I did this, this, and this? And what would really happen? And I found myself, I didn't really create anything, no masterpiece, but I found myself having more fun. And I found a couple things that I do want to explore a little bit more, and all because of, I think it was like a podcast or something like that. And I'm just like, wow, that's so, throw out the rules. You don't need them.
Well, it's interesting. I think about this a lot, and it's like, we have principles and foundational concepts that we can be aware of and explore, like value patterns, No-10, intuitive composing, and all these kinds of things. And that's kind of like knowledge. It's kind of like the roots in the trunk of a tree. It's kind of the big concepts, the big ideas that you can play with, right? But yet they're not rules. And it's like, if you can play with the big idea, and the big idea might be you have a dream of exploring continuous line, or you are drawn to particular shapes or colors or whatever, and you want to go down that path for a while in a series. So you come from that big idea rather than from the outside in. It's the inside out. You don't want to start at the leaves. And to me, technique is the leaves, and we don't want to lead with technique. Okay. I mean, technique can be fun and all of that, but it's like the little pieces out here. And I see a lot of artists trying to grab technique after technique after technique, and even leading with technique, but it doesn't get you to that deepest place, I don't think. And that deepest place comes from the inside that can be informed by concepts, but not ruled by rules, right?
Yeah, no, it makes so much sense because I am a structured girl and I kind of like building order from chaos. But I started to realize that it was hindering me in terms of what I'm able to create and the joy that I have from creating those things. So I've been trying to explore these ideas of not having to do things in a certain way or a certain order, or like how I mix things. And really, because I'm working with color, and so who's this say that I can't use a certain color with a certain color? And why is mud ugly? um, I love mud. And so, like really explore those things and why brightness is more desired than the mud. So it's been a really fun thing for me to kind of explore and challenge my own beliefs and some of those rules, with creating that way.
Yeah, it's so interesting because there's so much paradox in painting and in creating. Every time I turn around, there's another paradox. And one of the paradoxes is, yeah, the beauty of mud and the power of it. And then there's like the power of the ugly painting. So that's a real paradox, because I believe that ugly paintings are the nascent embryonic forms of new work that is trying to emerge, is trying to be born. And at first we don't see it, we don't recognize it, we're uneasy with it, it's awkward, we reject it, we're allergic to it. And yet it might be the beginnings of something astonishing, right? And it might be actually something that you may see it as ugly right now, but 10 years down the road, you'll go, wow, that piece still wows me.
I actually found an old portrait, like one of the very first ones that I did, and I hated it and buried it, and it fell out of an old book of mine. I'm just like, this is the cutest little thing I've ever seen. And then I flipped it over to see who made it. It was mine. I thought somebody had, like, one of my artistic friends sent me one of her sketchbook pages. It was mine. And I'm just like, and it told me, I made it at the Barnes and Noble in Anchorage. And it like told me the time of the day and what I was doing while making it. And I'm just like, what? I'm like, I can't even believe, I don't even remember making this. And, but it was just one of those moments for me. When I didn't know that it was my own, it was beautiful. And
That's really beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like we invite back these orphaned off parts of ourselves. And it's like these pieces that we reject and we see them as ugly or other, and then they fall away. And then that beautiful story where you refound that piece and at first didn't even know it was yours, but that somehow it still, somehow you allowed it to live though. Somehow it survived through this time in that book. And there it is. And it's waiting for you perhaps to catch up to it. It was out there in your future, right? It was,
Yeah.
it's in you, and it was expressing something. And sometimes we're not there yet to receive it, right?
Yeah, I could actually that really makes me think so much, actually makes me kind of emotional to think about that piece, because I remember at that time, because I was working full time, I was going through cancer treatment, and I just did not have the mental capacity to focus on those arts. And I was just like, one day I'm going to be an artist, and one day I'll be able to make really pretty things. And years later, I'm still learning to be an artist, and I don't think I'll ever finish that journey. But it's nice to know that little hope, that little spark, I've been able to take little tiny steps, and just to get to that moment. But I think I'm going to be cherishing that picture. And actually, I believe with what you said, I'm going to frame it, because I think it has much deeper meaning than what I actually thought it did. So thank you for that.
Yes. It's that is a beautiful story. And I actually got goosebumps when you were talking about that. And I think that that sometimes something deeply meaningful and kind of ineffable and inarticulable comes through an early work, and we don't understand it at the time. And this is why I ask artists oftentimes to let their work live, let it be. Don't necessarily throw it out or go back over it. Let it be and move on, because 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, that piece might have a message for you in there. I came across the very first sculpture I made in that very first private class with my teacher was a pregnant woman, very pregnant. And this was when I was 32. I was not pregnant, had not been, I wasn't married or anything, but it was a pregnant woman with a youthful body, and yet her face was 80 years old. And it was just one of these interesting things where if I got caught up in rules, I would say, oh, that's not unified. I must change that. But I didn't. And this cachectic, elderly, bony face showed up. And I just allowed it to be, even though it was seemingly a mismatch with the rest of the body. But I believe that there's a deep message and story in that continues to live. It's like a dream. You know how dreams are like, they are like gems, and they can teach us things, and they don't often make sense, but they have deep meanings. And so I think it's good to live with your art like that and allow all of it, especially what feels uncomfortable, to be.
I love that. I'm going to make sure that even moving forward, I'm going to continue to keep those pieces. I don't throw away anything anymore. And I always leave a timestamp and love notes to myself so I can remember, because I'm very forgetful and I can forget very quickly. And so having those reminders remind me, because I'm so forgetful, it's really nice to connect back to those, because I can remember once I give myself those cues. It's like, oh yeah, I can remember all these things now. And
Yes.
so that, I think that is like so valuable for us, especially starting artists. And I don't even think just the starting artists, I think maybe even seasoned artists, to really understand that all of their art actually has a meaning for us. And it's not just for professional work or anything, but even with that professional work, there's a message for us there. I really love that.
I believe that art is really, to me, about getting at meaning and aliveness. And I believe that there's a deep value in writing about this and documenting this and keeping an art journal or notes electronically, whatever it is. But documenting your journey, documenting your ahas and revelations, your struggles, your not knowings, and all of that, because documentation confers value. That we value something. We want to bring it from the invisible to the visible. We bring it into awareness. And that's what I hear that you are doing with your art.
And it's interesting because now that you say that, I can actually see that. And I struggled so much with even just, restarting my journey, or taking the next, not restarting, but taking the next step of my journey, is allowing myself to just create, just explore, and not be perfect at whatever I'm trying to create, and actually give myself that space, because so often I got trapped in that thought that, in order for me to be able to live my dreams or to be an artist, I actually had to create like these beautiful, perfect, prolific, like sketches and drawings before I even touched a pencil. And it's just like, I stunted myself so much just by not giving myself that permission to just have that creative freedom with all of that.
This is a big one, and that is, there's this perfectionism that shows up, that many of us, probably most of us, grapple with continually. And the power of telling yourself that it's not about creating a masterpiece. If you really can finally begin to get that, if you can move off of that you need to create a masterpiece, and you really get into the attitude of experimentation and the attitude of the power of the ugly painting, and you really get into accessing the adjacent possible, and you work in a series, because then that helps you to make it not so precious, because you're really in there like a scientist, and you are exploring variations on whatever that big idea is that you're looking at in that particular. It could be 2 to 5 to 200 paintings, and then you also listen if something else calls you, and go ahead and do that as well. You're not trapped in this thing of this series, but really this is enormous to kind of grapple with this issue of the masterpiece, and how you talk to yourself makes all the difference in moving through that and going for that, experimentation.
Yeah, no, definitely. That just resonates so much with me. And just knowing, like, I the perfectionism definitely stops you dead in your tracks. And then it also gives you that, it kind of stunts you from giving yourself that permission to create. Because if your art doesn't look like Picasso or like whoever you admire, when your work doesn't actually look like theirs, you stop your process once again. And as I've traveled along this journey, as I'm starting to realize, it's not me trying to emulate the people that I admire the most. Actually, what I admire is that they were actually creating. What I want to emulate is that ability to be able to create, share my stories, put the colors down, and do things in a way that feels right to me, versus creating something that is praised or well liked or well received or told to be good work, like that rewarding system that we have growing up. If we do something good, then we get praised, and then it's worthy of doing. And
Yes.
so, getting out of that position and giving yourself that approval, giving yourself that acceptance and love for your work. And but this is something that it's only been a very short period of time that I have been able to acknowledge within myself, is that what I really want and what I love the most about my artists that I follow is that they actually gave themselves permission to create, show up, and do what they wanted to do, versus getting the permission and the validation from outside sources.
That's huge. And that is absolutely, and we can learn from seeing artists who have been able to move through that territory. And that is to move from extrinsic validation or external validation to internal or intrinsic validation, that you define what you want to do, what you love, what you value, what you're going to explore and experiment with. It comes from the inside. It's an inside job. It's not an outside thing. And when you begin to finally move off of looking out there for approval, but rather coming from in here of allowing, which is also allowing, the uneasy pieces to come through, and really getting the value of that and getting the value of experimentation. That is a big, big thing in your cycle as an artist, in your life cycle as an artist, when you start to get that. And I think that it's a natural sequence where in the beginning, artists tend to kind of emulate other artists because, they say, I don't know what I'm doing, and we're learning and all of that. And then eventually you get that you want to move off of that, whether you're emulating, Helen Frankenthaler or Cy Twombly or whomever, Picasso, whatever. Finally, that is a dead end because it's not coming from inside of you. And we ultimately get that. It ends up being boring and not gratifying. But then here's another danger that happens after that. Finally, we've stopped emulating, the masters or the ones we look up to. Finally, we've started to come from the inside, and we start really going there and accessing the adjacent possible and exploration and all of that. And then another danger arises. And that danger is we begin to repeat ourselves. The danger is a success catastrophe. It's the situation where you're going along, you're finally expressing yourself, and perhaps you might even start getting seen and known and, selling your work, selling out shows, all these things. The danger there is to just barely change it all so you can keep repeating that success. And so we go from emulating others to emulating ourselves. And this is a real danger. This is a real danger for people who are along on their journey. And so that's where we really got to double down again, just like we did before when we were emulating others. Now we got to double down again and say, wait a minute, got to keep experimenting, got to keep taking those risks, going to that edge. You've got all these collectors, they love your work, but you don't want to keep doing the same thing. You've got to keep evolving as an artist. So it's always there that we've got to keep pushing ourselves to that edge.
That really struck a nerve right there, because I have already been thinking about those kind of things in my own art, is like creating what's wanted by our customers or our clients or our family members, or who knows who's requesting something. And so that really hits a little ping point. And what I've been doing is like, I can still create art professionally, but then I'll just keep my sketchbook just for me, and I can do whatever I want. And, I can have all sorts of I can do whatever I wish. But I think there's an important piece that we need to recognize as artists, is that, we can make the choice of being able to be creative, expressively open, because I think that we hide so many things, so that way we put our best face forward and not show all of our work. And I understand it from a business perspective, so that way, people know what store they're shopping at, but that's not who we are as human beings. And it's definitely not us as artists, or at least not me. And I'm sure that there are people who like to do those things, but certainly for not me. I guess I would have a question, is like, how do you actually help yourself from getting into that kind of pattern?
Yeah. So that's an area. So I think that's where you want to stay aware of that tendency to fall back to safety. The safety of emulating others, the safety of emulating your own successes, and knowing that it may feel good for a little bit, but ultimately that's going to not be gratifying either if you're not, evolving your work. And again, evolving is like, there's incremental changes. It's not like you got to constantly, jump from this to that, but it's continually moving and risking and threading it through. I do have artists who have kind of bread and butter paintings that they sell. And so what they'll do is like have this group of paintings that they sell. And so they'll have this group of paintings that they sell, and then they give themselves space to do their deep experimentation, where they don't care what anybody thinks about it. Always to give themselves that space. That's so important. Even if over here they're doing commissions, it might be dog portraits, whatever it is, they might continue to do that. That's their bread and butter, and that's fine. And they are artists, which means they are evolving their work, evolving their art, continually exploring from the world, the intersections of art, science, life, relationships, all of it comes through, and it's endless.
I think that that is a really important point for us to be able to acknowledge and to be able to understand that this is part of the process and it is a part of that balance, but you don't have to, I guess, put them in like little boxes. You can be all of those boxes all mixed in together. And I really like that idea, because I mean, you can even look from behind. I have all my little boxes. And but I think it would be a lot easier to do if it's not so categorized and so like separated, and being able to blend all those pieces in together, and maybe even find a level of a happier place with your artwork and what you're doing. I know that you have like a system for yourself to be able to explore those things. Can you share a little bit more about that process that you have when you approach your art, and how you kind of teach your students those same steps?
Yes, so there are many ways that I have of starting. I'm very big on creating lots of starts, painting starts, and not getting so caught up in so-called finishes. So, so that's one thing, lots of starts. And there's this concept that is deep in my mind, and it's called 0 to 1. So 0 to 1 is a mathematical concept that is just fascinating to me. And so this concept is that from 0 to 1 is the largest interval. It's larger than 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on. That from 0 to 1, and this can be proven mathematically, I won't get into that here, from nothing to something, 0 being nothing, 1 something, is larger than 1 to 2, something to something, 2 to 3, something to something. So that concept informs me in my art, because it says just starting is enormous. Just starting. So go into your studio and just start. Start mixing paint. For me, it's like swimming. It's like, go put your toe in the water. Right? And you can say no after that if you want to, but just start. And the interesting thing is, once you start, it tends to activate further activity. It tends to kind of nudge us on, because we start to get into it. It's like, oh, okay. And then we're in it. So there's that. And I think it's also good to kind of come from a place of ease as much as you can. So ease and playfulness and that joy that you were talking about. And so kind of that. And then the last piece, and I'm holding this in my mind because this is giving me permission, is allowing for the ugly painting to emerge and actually embracing it and saying, this is fantastic, because who knows where that might go. So I'm going to show you all one. This is only one. There's so many that I have, and it was like, which one do I show you? So this one I'm going to show you is called the 6 maquette exercise. And so a maquette is a little study. And Henry Moore, the great sculptor, English sculptor, used to create thousands, probably tens of thousands of maquettes from clay and looking at pieces of sea drift, in nature, and just these little pieces, but he would play with it. And this would inform his colossal, enormous sculptures that you've seen all over the world. So you play with ideas. So I love the idea of maquettes. So we're playing with ideas here. We're not going to be caught up in what it looks like. We don't care what it looks like. We actually want to be surprised, because we're cultivating surprise. cultivating surprisability. So all of these concepts, this inner landscape, is very important for you as an artist so that you can continually evolve your work. That's what we're interested in. So I'm going to start these maquettes, and I'll guide you through it. And again, I invite you to just allow. So you can get a journal, or you can get a piece of paper out in front of you. You could even get newsprint if you want. And I encourage you to get out some different tools if you can, if you've got them. Different types of tools. Like I've got this wide brush here. I've got a shaper. I have a sash brush. You know, different tools that will give you different marks. I've got a long brush that's very thin, and you could use a spatula, anything. You could also have markers of various sorts, pencils. I have a little piece of charcoal here. You know, whatever it is, you know, a few tools, any kind of thick markers, thin, it doesn't matter, anything you want. So kind of gather some supplies if you can, or you can just watch this and try this later. And again, you can work in your journal. I'm going to work on a big board here. Let me move this forward so we can get closer to it. I'm working on a big board so you can see it better, right? Okay, so give me just a moment. And the way I'm going to start, and I would invite you to do this too, is we're going to, first of all, we're going to create 6 squares or rectangles on this sheet of paper, okay? I'm just going to divide it up. So I hope you can see this. I'm just making some squares.
I see it perfectly.
Perfect. So just mark off your squares or your rectangles. And, you know, don't worry about it. This is about experimentation. We're not worried about what this looks like. Okay, and let's get another one. Okay. So we've got our 6 squares marked off, or 6 rectangles if that's what you decided. And then you can start with any one of these, but what we're going to do is we're going to make 6 moves on each square. So 6 moves, and you can change things up. I recommend that you consider to constrain your palette if you do this, like maybe just 2 colors or 3. You know, don't throw in everything if you can, because it just we're trying to simplify things here, okay? On the other hand, you can put every color that you've got in there if you wish. So it's not really about the colors. I'm just going to make a move. So again, go in and just make 6 moves on each one. So I'm working on this center one. I'm just going to start working into it. And we're making 6 moves.
I love the concept of the moves.
Yeah. And we're not thinking, we're just, it's just spontaneous. Stream of consciousness. And just keep moving along. And okay. You can change up your arm, work with a different hand if you wish.
I'm going to actually try that non-dominant hand.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to do that, switch it up. You can throw in a wild card color if you want. Something speaks to you.
Now, Nancy, when you normally do this, do you use music or do you actually sit with your thoughts?
Well, a lot of times it's silent, and I just hear the scratching sound. But so probably with my thoughts, whatever's or non-thought.
I'm with you. I like to be alone with my thoughts, and it's really nice to be able to do that while I create.
Yeah. Well, one of the exercises I was thinking about showing you all has to do with music, so maybe for another time.
I have played a little bit with that, and it does make different marks.
Yes. There's a whole thing on that, right? If you lose count of, how many moves you made, don't worry about it. Right?
Now, what do you normally do with these moves? Like, how do you process that? Or like, how do you implement them later on into something?
Yeah. So what happens is I just do these, maquettes. And again, no judging, censoring. This is stream of consciousness. This is just 6 moves. And they can be, you can vary the moves. And the more you do this, the more you'll just keep going into these edges of moves that are unfamiliar and so forth. And sometimes I just let them be as they are. Sometimes I might go in and integrate them, like move across the line there into the next one so that they start to connect together. And you can make these closer together if you want, and they can run into each other. But lots of times students will do this and they'll go, wow, I just really love it. And they'll frame it. I've had people do that. But that's, not really the point. But it's more about this experience invites loosening up, invites your gestural expression. Because when you make a move, that opens up a whole set of paths that weren't there before. That's the adjacent possible. You're opening up as you create. You're affecting creation itself. Every move opens up the set of possibilities that wasn't there before that move was made. And so we are creating continuously. And when we go in there without strategic mind, without a plan, something astonishing can happen because we didn't plan it. We get the mind out of the way and allow the gestural expression to come through. And just that is so valuable, because when you can take that to your other work and it informs it. I've had many students say it loosens them up. New moves come through because they've been creating these starts. These starts may never see the light of day in terms of an audience, or they might, but they fuel you, and this will start to show up in your other work, even if you're doing pet portraits, even if you're doing very representational paintings. It will start to come through because this is like, when you play the cello, you practice scales, and that has more kind of, concepts in terms of perhaps rules, but it's kind of like working with the instrument, which is your body and your gestural expression, and allowing it.
I don't know if you quilt or do anything like that, but I think that that is actually a really important a concept for us as artists to know, is that gestural freedom and just our own signatures there. One of the, like, if you go back and you look at like those antique quilts that are like in museums and things like that, they actually they don't look at like the perfection of the quilt. They're actually looking for misperfections, and it's not even the imperfections, it's our signature. And because we hold our pencils in a way that only we hold them, we stitch in only a way that we stitch, and they can actually identify the artist who made the quilt just by their stitches, because like every so many stitches, it does something, and it's consistent. We have patterns in those. And so these starts can actually help us develop that signature that's uniquely us.
Yes, I've seen, is it the G's Bend, some of those quilts, and yes, and I come from a family of quilters. I actually started quilting when I was 4 years old, and it was the crazy quilts that you just piece together wildly by hand. And I love that. And yeah, all of this is like, you have your own lexicon that comes through your body and your gestural expression. And I take physicians at Stanford every year for 10 years. I've done this at Sierra Camp, and I take them through an exercise. It's where we create these starts related to a word or music, and it's like, I assert that you have your own particular lexicon, your own particular signature that will thread through all your work. And this is what we see too with the maquettes, whether it's clay maquettes or these kinds of maquettes. You do have moves that will come through.
I love that, and I have never put those together ever before, but that is absolutely brilliant. And it's proof, it's scientific proof, because I worked in these libraries and museums that actually were looking specifically for those things. So I used to work in restoration, and we were looking for specific things, and that's exactly how we could identify those things. And it's just so interesting that I never put those two together.
Well, that is it. I mean, this is creativity right here, right now. You put that together. It's about the intersections of putting things together. And this is what happens when we start to create, and creative conversations invite that as well. And learning all that we can in nature, reading books, other kinds of activities like playing an instrument or sewing will all inform your art. And it's so rich.
It really is. And what a beautiful way to be able to do that too. It's just such a blessing to be able to have all of these different influences for our art and inspiration for whatever we create. And I really love that. This was actually a really fun exercise. And I made 2 boxes, and I thought I'd be quick enough to go ahead and do them. And I got to play with different colors than I normally play with, and I played with different brushes. But I actually put my one brush to the side because I'm going to play with that a little bit more because that has some unique shapes.
It's great. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So thank you for doing this. I know that you have created something magical for our community. And do you mind letting everyone know what you created and tell us a little bit more about what you created and where we can find you?
Okay. So what I created is, it's a worksheet called 0 to 1, because this was so powerful. Big concepts from mathematics and science and psychology and nature can really help your art and help you and invite you to create and to believe in yourself as you do that. So that's the gift I have for you. You can get it at artistsjourney.com/gift. It'll be there for you. Just put your information in there. You can get that, download it. It's a worksheet to play with this idea. And you can find me at artistsjourney.com, or nancyhillis.com will direct you to artistsjourney.com. And that particular exercise comes from my second book, which is the Artist Journey Creativity Reflection Journal. I'll show it to you right here. I don't know if that's backwards or not, but
it's not backwards. I see it perfectly. I got mine.
Yay! So you can see it's very colorful, and it's a book for you to write down, 0 to 1, documentation to bring visibility to your thoughts and your ideas and what matters to you. And it's really about meaning. What's the most meaningful to you?
And that's the key. It's like, what is most meaningful to us? Because it really is our unique experiences, our unique challenges, just our unique way of solving our problems too. And it's just like your concept with the gestural expression is that we do each of these uniquely. No one else can do them the way that we do them. And I really love that concept. So thank you so much for this.
Yes. I think that when you reached out to me, one of the things you said to me is that one of the things that spoke to you was, there is this phrase, we don't know if it's German or it's Chinese, but it's find joy in your life. It's later than you think. And then I wrote a whole piece on, dead women don't paint, don't write books or play the cello. So it's like, and I have actually, it's a thought experiment. It's in this book too. It's the deathbed thought experiment, and it is, what is going to matter to you on your deathbed? And this is a really good thought experiment to go through and to keep revisiting, because that can change. But I think oftentimes it's around relationships and love, and the other piece is the dreams, the dreams you have. And did you say yes to those dreams, or they're unlived dreams in you still pushing for expression? And if so, listen to those and say yes to the dreams that are calling you.
Nancy, you could not have said a more meaningful piece, because I remember that article, and I was in a certain spot in my life, and once I read that, I knew from that moment forward that I was going to be working towards my goals and my dreams of just writing and illustrating and creating, and not for someone else to say oh, you've done great work, you're an artist finally, but actually creating the work because I desired so much to do so. And whether if people find them worthy or not is irrelevant, or if that was successful. At the end of the day, what makes you a success is that you actually showed up and did your work and did that what you really wanted to do, whether it was validated or not. And I actually, I forgot that you had given me that moment. And thank you for reminding me of that, because that is the most powerful thing ever that I've seen on, on paper, is like, dead women do not write. And that is so
Yeah.
true. And I'm never going to make my books, and I'm never going to draw my paintings, and I'm never going to tell the stories that are living deep inside me if I'm not creating. And I wonder how many other women have art that they want to create, stories to tell, and all these things, and not giving themselves permission because we have so many other priorities, just so much higher than that,
Yes, yes. And it's really saying yes to the dreams that live inside you. And if you'll listen, you'll notice them. And some of them have been there for years, and it's time now. Now is the time to say yes.
You are so right. Thank you so much, Nancy. I'm so grateful that you've come and you shared your wisdom and showed us some techniques that we can just learn to play with and create our own unique art. And I'm just so thankful that you joined us and are here with us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Misty, and thank you for what you're doing here. This is beautiful work. It's deeply meaningful. You're helping other people. You're encouraging artists. And I want to thank all of you in the audience who are here. And I encourage you to believe in yourself and say yes to your dreams. Get into your studio, 0 to 1. Get in there and start experimenting.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. And as you know, later on this afternoon, Nancy and I will be in Facebook Live and there to answer any questions. Nancy will help you with anything that you might be stumbling with. And anyway, I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and we will see you later on this afternoon. Bye, guys.
Bye.